Welcome to the Rude Dog Show. That was abrupt, wasn't it? As abrupt as the NBA regular season has come to a close. Last games were played yesterday. Anyway, welcome to the Rude Dog Show. This is Rudy Reyes on WBLZSports.com. I have a very special guest with me, almost a last-minute addition, but welcome nevertheless. Anyway, welcome onto the show, Ray Woodson. No, not to be confused with Rod Woodson. However, Ray is in the Bay. He does Giants Warriors postgame, does some 49er pregame as well, based in San Francisco. Welcome, Ray, to the show. How are you?
I'm good, and no, they never confused me with Rod Woodson, that's for sure.
Well, that's good. I can't imagine being confused with Rod Woodson. I'm probably closer to the shade of Rod Woodson than you.
Believe me, athletically, there's a big gap there between me and Rod.
Yeah, well, you and me both. We could put ourselves in the same conversation.
Yeah.
Anyway, we won't go there. We like our coffee and donuts too much. No, I don't know. Coffee, yes, for me, but not so much the whole donut thing. It's not for me. I don't want to build the donut in the zone. So I'd rather stay out of the zone.
It does have the four basic food groups: sugar, starch, and fat.
Well, in that case, sign me up. Yeah. Sign me up. Where do I sign up at? Anyway, everybody, look, tune in now. Download the app. This is going to be a great show. It's free. It's on Google. It's on iTunes. You can go to therudogshow.com and also download it. And sure, your smartphone becomes, well, even smarter by downloading the app today, because you don't want to be left out in the cold. Download it now and join the Rude Dog Show. Ray, as we wind down and transition from the closing of the NBA regular season into a very highly contested postseason play throughout the Eastern and Western conferences, obviously a variety of teams looking to make a run. Some are deep and others are even deeper. Make no mistake, the teams who rise to the top are the cream of the crop. What are your thoughts on the end of the regular season, and do you look for this to be a very highly contested postseason run in both conferences?
Well, I think there's some pretty intriguing matchups, in the first and maybe the second rounds. But I know this sounds like Bay Area bias, but to me, it's the Warriors and everybody else when it comes down to it. When you get to the finals, I do still believe the Cavaliers are going to be there despite all their problems. LeBron has made it to the finals as a two-seed, on a two-seed team before. It wouldn't shock me if they get through the East. But, you're looking at, for example, Clippers Jazz. To me, that's a leaner. That could go either way. How about the Cavaliers and the Pacers, LeBron and Paul George? That's a nice little safety first-round matchup. But to me, the regular season was a prelude to this, and the first couple of rounds of the playoffs are a prelude to what I think a lot of people are pointing for, and that would be part 3, Warriors-Cavaliers. It would not shock me at all if we're talking about that in June.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to a little revenge by the Warriors. Why? Because defensively they didn't look nowhere near as they look this year, of course, with the addition of Kevin Durant. I like the Cavaliers matchup against the Pacers. I think that's a matchup that's not really talked about. Why? Because LeBron's going to bring it. He's done it year in and year out, made it to the playoffs, deep in the postseason, two-time champion, once with the Heat, once with the Cavaliers, then in turn putting the Cavaliers on the map in the 2016 NBA season. Yesterday on the show, I'd spoken of the possible first to being out in the first round in the Western Conference playoff picture. You were talking about the Warriors, and just like everyone else, that this season has been filled with highlights with guys like James Harden for the Rockets. He's been playing relatively insane minutes throughout the season. However, he played a meek 35 minutes, but he went 8 for 13 for 27 points, and last night against the Timberwolves closed out the regular season. When you look at James Harden, and you've seen kind of the, not so much the feed me, but give me an opportunity to play coach, and that's what he's been doing, lighting up the screen. When you think of James Harden, does the word MVP work in any way, shape, or form in the front or at the end of his name?
Well, I think that there's not a crazy choice here when you're talking about Harden or Westbrook or Kawhi Leonard. To me, if I had to vote, I'd give it to Kawhi. But Harden's had a great year, and Mike D'Antoni, made him the point guard, and that worked out beautifully. And he's controlled the offense, and he's a big part of why Houston was better this year and one of the more entertaining teams. And oh, by the way, Houston or KC first round, that's pretty tasty as well. Westbrook is the Thunder. They're in the playoffs because of Westbrook. There's a strong argument for MVP and a historic season that he's had. I think some of those numbers that, he's been chasing this triple-double thing. So to me, some of those numbers have empty calories, but that's not to denigrate the overall season that he had. He was unbelievable. But for me, it was Kawhi Leonard with a team that doesn't have any other star-level players. Tony Parker is not peak Tony Parker anymore. Manu Ginobili is not peak Manu Ginobili anymore. You got Marcus Aldridge there, but he's down a little bit from last year. To me, it was all about Kawhi because he gets done at both ends of the floor. Defensive Player of the Year in the past. I think it's going to be Draymond who gets that award this year. But also, Kawhi improving so much offensively. That's the way I look at it. But it wouldn't shock me if Westbrook gets the award. That would be my call right now.
Yeah, no, I look at James Harden, I think to myself, this guy has been showing up night after night with 3 tight daggers. And you were talking about Harden, how he is the Rockets. Yeah. You're right, he is the Rockets. He is the face of the franchise. The biggest question is, does this Rockets team have enough from a depth standpoint in their rotation with the guards and the forwards that they have in order to give Harden the time he needs to sit down and collect himself without, blowing a 10 or 12-point lead? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it comes down to, I think, defensively, when you're going up against Harden, don't reach, because he's going to drive to the paint. He's going to get to the line. He's very adept at that. There's a lot of play acting going on there, but he's managed to sell it to the referees for years. Why would he change now? But yeah, he can also hit a dagger 3. I think it comes down to who else is helping him out, because the Warriors have done a very effective job against Harden, and I realize he probably wasn't 100% the last time they played. But are the complimentary guys getting it done? That's why, for example, the pickup of Eric Gordon was so big for them, and Ryan Anderson too. And so they spread out the floor. They got threats from everywhere. Problem for them, for example, going up against a team like the Warriors is, they might be able to out-free them in a particular game, but defensively, they can't match the Warriors. And by the way, the Rockets aren't that bad defensively, but they're not up to Warriors standards. So I think in these early rounds, I would favor Houston. I wouldn't be surprised if they got to the conference finals once again because of that tremendous firepower. But in the end, I think the Warriors stand in their way.
Yeah, I do as well. When you look at, and make no mistake, I'm not going to douse on Russell Westbrook. Speaking of calories, he's burned a lot of them, chasing a triple-double with Oscar Robertson, which also holds a very historic value in of itself. But despite 18 minutes of play last night, he managed to put up 5 points. Westbrook would not be outdone, however. He went 1 for 5, 3-point range perimeter, 5 rebounds, 8 assists, and, of course, 1 block. The amount of time he's played, isn't this something he's used to doing? Well, at least I could sure of that. What are your thoughts on Westbrook? It's almost as if he's been playing like a man possessed because he's been maybe shunned MVP. He doesn't like the media very much. He doesn't like lengthy conversations. If I had an MVP vote, it would probably be Russell Westbrook. Why? Because of his athleticism. As far as being personal, being friendly to the media and so on and so forth, he's been known to shove, media members out of the way. I don't know that he's the consummate MVP. I mean, we could probably flip the script, talk about the NFL, how Cam Newton didn't exactly act like the NFL MVP, but is Westbrook your final vote? Because I think he gets it based on that point.
No, I would say, and I said this 3 minutes ago, that Kawhi to me is the MVP, but if I had to guess who's going to get it, it's going to be Westbrook. And as I said before, it's no crazy choice here. You can make a strong argument for at least 3 of these guys, if not more. Talk about Harden, Westbrook, and Kawhi. But, there's no doubt he's had a historic season. Once Durant left, this is his team. He plays with controlled anger. that sometimes it's out of control, but that's, he's a force. He's an absolute force, especially in transition. He's deadly, and now he has developed a little more reliable three-point shot. But, he goes up against the Warriors, and that goes away. I mean, they've always had a good defensive game plan against him. And, if you're defending in OKC, you got to find a way to stop Westbrook if you can. Easier said than done. But, no, he's been a force of nature this year. It's been something to behold. But I go back to, you mentioned Oscar Robertson. Back when he was playing, they didn't even have the phrase triple-double. They even thought about that. I mean, there were a couple of seasons where he fell just shy of averaging a triple-double, as well as actually accomplishing that feat. He wasn't thinking about that. Whereas Westbrook, I mean, we've seen it. There's been games where he's tried to artificially get to that point, whether it's, doing what he does in free throw line or coming in trying to steal a rebound, passing up shots to get assists, things like that. You've seen that late in games with him. But again, that does not denigrate what he's done overall this season. He's just been absolutely tremendous.
Yeah, no, he has. Oscar Robertson, in fact, was in attendance in his last two games. So he was sitting on the sidelines thinking to myself, Oscar Robinson again, because of the triple-double not being accounted for, then certainly has shown up to a point where, well, okay, if he breaks it, he breaks it. Oscar Robinson not real overprotective, whereas other players in the NBA say, well, you can't take my scoring, championship. That's mine. And rightfully so, he owns that. However, if someone wants to break it, well, really not a whole lot you can do. You just sit on the sidelines or sit in the stand like Oscar Robinson and say, you know what, this is what it is. But you're right, talking about Kawhi Leonard for half a minute, shifting gears to the Spurs. Spurs have done absolutely fantastic things. Of course, not having Tim Duncan as a part of that overall lineup. And I've watched Kawhi Leonard, the type of quiet leader that he is. Very, very humble when he talks, and very humble during interviews. When you think of Kawhi Leonard, I think of a natural-born leader. I think he learned a lot of that from Tim Duncan. At times, Tim Duncan also verbal, but for the most part, very, very quiet. So do you think Kawhi Leonard learned something from Tim Duncan while playing with him very limitedly to the point where now he applies that to his game?
Without a doubt. I mean, he is the heir apparent to Tim Duncan, both in demeanor and what he does, again, at both ends of the floor. And this is also the Popovich influence as well. Couldn't have had a better coach to help develop a very talented young player. If I recall, Kawhi was drafted 15th overall in the year that he came out. And so a lot of teams passed on this guy, including the Warriors, by the way. But that's a guy that I just appreciate, like I appreciate Duncan. For Duncan, you just appreciated the fundamental aspect of his game, the unassuming nature, and it was a good counterpart to some of the players who are very demonstrative in this league. And I enjoy those players too, but at the same time, you appreciate a guy who just gets it done, lets his play, do the talk. And oh, by the way, I mean, Kawhi was very shy when he came into the league. He's actually opened up, since he came into the league a few years ago. And yet still, by contrast, is very quiet in the way he does his business. But I do appreciate that about him. And, if Draymond Green isn't getting Defensive Player of the Year or Rudy Gobert, it's going to be Kawhi Leonard. I mean, you can kind of interchange those three. I just think Draymond's going to get the award this year.
Yeah, I do as well. I like the way he's been playing. We'll talk about him a little bit more because I want to get into the losers who are not going on. And no offense to any of these teams that are not making it, whether you're talking the Eastern Conference or the Western Conference, but it's seen its share of would-be contenders that early on looked, well, relatively promising. They happen to fall face first right into the NBA lottery. And, of course, those teams don't need any confirmation from me. I mean, you can say, you can say that they didn't quite make it or they fell short if you want to use that type of magnetism. But the Suns, Lakers, Timberwolves, Kings, Mavericks, Pelicans, and the Nuggets, despite their efforts, these teams will need to do much more to gain ground in a very tough Western Conference. And when you think about the Golden State Warriors, obviously leading the Western Conference as they have for the last few years, they're very dominant, but they're a leader for a myriad of teams. I know we were talking about Westbrook, and we're talking about Harden, we're talking about, Draymond Green, you're talking about all these various players who've made individual impacts, not so much the sacrifices that you would think they would make. However, the Warriors have quietly, despite not having Kevin Durant during a small segment of time, where they look like they were getting back to their original dichotomy without Kevin Durant. I know you watched this all unfold there in the Bay Area. What does Kevin Durant truly mean to the Warriors, and will he be that defensive presence that they so needed last year against the Cavaliers in the finals?
Well, that's sort of the under-the-radar thing about Durant's contribution this year. He might have had his best defensive year. And we got a glimpse of that in the Western Conference Finals last year. That's the thing that stood out to me more than anything. And, we're used to seeing Durant being so good offensively. But what he contributed to the defensive end in terms of disrupting passing lanes with his length, being a rim protector, that's been the pleasant part of his game this year. And part of the reason the Warriors were near the top at the defensive rankings. Now, when he went out, the Warriors struggled there for about 6 or 7 games, and the way they found their groove again was first at the defensive end. And, they still had 3 All-Stars. So they get this done without him for a reasonable stretch of time, and they did it with defense. And Draymond Green led the way. And I pointed this out in an interview yesterday. They were playing the 76ers. They were struggling. They lost 6 of 8, and they were trailing by double digits at home to the 76ers in the fourth quarter. And I think it was sort of in a microcosm, the highlight reel of Draymond's Defensive Player of the Year highlights, because he was brilliant in that fourth quarter. And that kind of helped turn it around, and it sort of emphasize the message to the Warriors that this has to start at the defensive end. And if they're going to make it all the way, it's got to be at the defensive end. And Durant is a part of that, without a doubt. But the thing about Durant, too, is, in the playoffs, you're not always going to get run-outs, fast break buckets. Sometimes it can get bogged down a little bit, and you get in the half-court set, and that's the guy you want to have. Because if he's on, there's nobody stopping him. There's no good matchup, really, against Kevin Durant when he is right. And that was encouraging about last night's game against the Lakers. A meaningless game otherwise for the Warriors, but Durant kind of shaking off some of the rust, especially from three-point range. And he made 5 3-pointers last night when he hadn't made any in the first 2 games. That was an encouraging part for him as well. And then, you get the whole thing about spacing the floor with Durant, with Steph, with Clay, all these guys, and Draymond, he's offensively more of a facilitator this year. He'll take a 3 if he's wide open and it's later in the clock. Otherwise, you've got Durant to do that for you. It's just in so many ways he's important to this team. Now, I would argue that even without Durant, the Warriors get to the finals. I think they were capable of doing that. They were playing well enough. But, over the long slog of 2 months in the playoffs, they know they're going to need this guy Durant, that the Splash Brothers can't do it every single night. But they were certainly back to being the Splash Brothers during that winning streak. Still, I'm sure everybody's pretty happy to have Durant back.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about it. When I look at the Golden State Warriors and they're the pre-2017 season, at times very colorful from the Thunder's former teammates, and, of course, a variety of them had a lot to say about Kevin Durant's departure, why he would leave. He wants to win a championship. He recognized last year that by getting, the year previous that he was swept, and his teammates were swept by the Golden State Warriors early, and it was very often. Kevin Durant in the lineup on the floor, 116.9 points per game versus without him at 109.2. So there's disparaging numbers right there between what he means to the Warriors on the floor versus what he means to them off of the floor. You were talking about defense and the fact that he could get into the paint. I mean, he almost had 2 blocks per game because of his height, because of his athleticism, his ability to get back in transition defense. I look at all of those things and think to myself, he was a perfect fit for the Warriors before the Warriors knew he was a perfect fit for them. He really was.
Yeah, and then they found out personality-wise in the Hamptons that, yeah, this guy's a fit, and he understands still what the Warriors were about. And we have this line when Iguodala's out there on the floor, with Steph and Clay and Draymond and Durant. We call that the Hamptons Five. That's a group that kind of melded basketball-wise pretty quickly, as well as personality-wise. And that was an important part for Durant. He pointed that out right away at the first press conference. That it was about basketball, but it was about more than that for him. And there's been all the second guessing going on this year, and why we've looked at everything as a prelude to the goal that was pretty much evident when they had the meeting and he made the decision on the 4th of July. This is all about pointing towards June and the finals and maybe getting back at the Cavaliers if they can. But the thing that struck me right away is that they made sure that Durant was comfortable in this offense. That was job one for the Warriors at the start of the year. That was done. And everything I'm seeing personality-wise, they blended pretty well. You'll see Draymond and KD sometimes in an animated conversation on the court. Draymond will be barking at KD, but they have an understanding, I think, and KD understands what Draymond is trying to do with motivation in terms of focus. And so, while it looks bad, sometimes it really isn't that way. And Durant has protested as much several times.
Yeah, you know what, the window could be closing for Durant. He's 28 years old. And do you think time is a factor when you look at his play, the fact he's been able to do it consistently regardless of what team he was with? Clearly the Thunder wasn't going anywhere. Sorry, Thunder fans, I'm just calling it like it is. Why? Because he didn't have those pieces around him. And similar to that in the NFL, where you have too much attention paid to one person, that tends to take on a different meaning because now you're trying to target this player, can't get it to him. In the NBA, it's basically the same thing. Say, well, who do we double? You know, we're inside of the paint. Who do we double? Who do we transition away from to block? And I think that is kind of the alleviator with having Kevin Durant as a part of being on the floor versus without him, because otherwise you would go directly to Draymond saying, you know what, this guy is a defensive magnet. Let's double team him and see if we can stop him from getting his little jump shots inside of the paint.
Yeah, and the focus was on the Splash Brothers when Durant wasn't here. And for example, in the finals last year, who got left open for corner threes? Harrison Barnes. And how many did he miss? A bunch. And so now, all year, defenses, instead of having to account for Harrison Barnes, they have to account for Kevin Durant. So that's a big step right there. Barnes, I think, was underappreciated because he did contribute things defensively. He's a pretty strong guy. He could take on a bigger defensive assignment. But at the other end of the floor, he was very inconsistent, and he went away in the finals. And so the Warriors were pretty much done with that because he was going to get his money, and they weren't going to pay him what he ended up getting with Dallas. So, the offensive end, it's who you double team, okay. Because on top of everything else, you got some pretty good passers on this team, too. So, okay, you're going to double team this guy. We're going to quickly find the other guy who's open. If he's not open, we're going to swing it around to the corner, and we're going to find another guy who's open. It's whack-a-mole. Right, it's on the floor.
Whack-a-green.
Long stretch of a playoff run. You've got to have all those weapons in place, I think, and it puts a little pressure off of the other guy. Steph has been tremendous in the way he's carried, the team at times, and he did that last year when he was banged up. And now this year he comes in healthy. Durant comes in healthy. Everybody's in kind of different frame of mind, I think, the last year. And, that's going to always be the number one thing, the health of the team. And, people talk about the Warriors being tired at the end of last year. Well, yeah, they were banged up. But that wasn't necessarily because they were going after 73 wins. That's because of stuff that happened in the postseason. So, anyway, long answer short, yeah, it's just such a defensive challenge when you have three sharpshooters on the floor.
Yeah, no, it's definitely tough with the Splash Brothers being not so much the go-to. I think there's a lot more parity now when you have Kevin Durant as a part of that lineup. Why? Because if Steph's not open, you send it to KD. I know early on in the season, they're really trying to figure it out. I mean, what better coach to put something together for Kevin Durant? And look, Kerr's no stranger to this. He's done it his entire career. But when you look at what he did with Durant, saying, look, we're going to insert you in, lots of communication, lots of conversation. Let's get Steph Curry to recognize that he's here to help, and let's work him in to the offense. You believe there was an early transition, was it a tough one for the Warriors? I mean, it looked as though there were some miscues early on. Do you believe they could have got it done a little bit more so without the miscues heading into the regular season?
Again, I think that the first job was to make sure this guy, Durant, was comfortable in this offense. That had to happen first. And so what happened was, yes, Steph Curry had to subjugate his game a little bit. And that was never more clear than in December and, for example, the Christmas Day game in Cleveland where he only took 11 shots. And so by the end of the calendar year, Curry and all the Warriors concluded, okay, we got Durant transitioned into the offense. We've got to re-assimilate Steph Curry. And that was a big emphasis in the month of January. And if you look at Curry's numbers in January, they took a big step up. So it was important for him to get his groove back. He did that while, still doing the same things that you were doing with Durant. Maybe not as many shot opportunities, but not that far off. And oh, by the way, Watson was mixed with Klay Thompson because he's kind of a quiet guy, but he's averaging almost the same amount, I think, as he did shots per game last year. People were talking about, is there going to be enough basketball for these guys? And Clay's like, well, there's going to be one ball and it's going to go through the hoop. He's great at those short one-liners, by the way. He's under the radar witty. But so Steph got back into his groove, and then Durant got hurt, and so Steph really had to take over this team once again during that time. So now the question becomes, Durant is back. Are they able to mix together? And I think, these last three games were important for that. And people wondering why they were on the floor last night in a meaningless game. It was about Steph, Klay, and KD having some time on the floor once again for at least a few minutes. And I think that's valuable for them going into the playoffs. But I think they've gone through sort of the roller coaster, the ups and downs through the season, and have an understanding of how this offense is going to work now.
Yep.
It probably took a season for all three of them to get comfortable, but I think they're there now.
I think they're more than there. I think there's a perfect storm brewing in Oracle Arena right now. And unless you were able to really pinpoint it down, you couldn't say that any one person is taking the limelight because everybody is. Everybody's having their own share of the limelight, however dim that is. When I look at Durant, I look at Curry, I look at Thompson, I look at Iguodala, I look at all of. Look, this team doesn't own the Western Conference because their bench is weak or they don't have enough talent on the bench. They were able to come in last year and really fulfill a very similar prophecy that the starters did. When you look at the depth of this Warriors bench, who stands out to you the most to take place of either Steph Curry or Thompson, or even if Durant and Curry are not on the floor at the same time heading in against the Trailblazers?
Well, Iguodala is the guy, the key guy coming off the bench, and he played really well down the stretch. And, he's got a contract drive going on top of everything else. But Iguodala is the perfect example of a guy who's just, now I value winning over anything else. I value culture. I like what they had here at Golden State. Well, he came over from Denver, and, he was communicating with those guys during the playoff series with Denver. So you could see that there was a simpatico going on there. So Iguodala is the guy coming off the bench who served so many roles. And one of the things that's happened with Durant out is he did take a bigger role offensively. That's not been his deal with the Warriors the last few years. His values at the defensive end of the floor, and one of the reasons he was the Finals MVP a couple of years ago, because he took this bigger load of guarding LeBron. That is the guy who I think were some questions going into the year because he's getting up there in years. But, the last month or so, he's been absolutely tremendous at both ends of the floor. His shooting percentage is way over 50%. Oh, by the way, his free throw shooting is back up again, which had been down for a few years. And I think that affected his offensive game as well, and maybe caused some hesitancy going through the class because he didn't want to go free throw line. I think that's sort of out of the way now. This is a guy who is going to be very, very important going into, all rounds of the playoff series. In Portland in particular, if the Mike team come on the floor and take on Lillard, But I think it's the key guy there is defensively in that series, Clay Thompson. He could be bouncing back and forth between McCollum and Willard in guarding assignments. That's going to be the big advantage the Warriors have. They can match the Trailblazers backcourt offensively, but they're better defensively. And then, Nurkic, how healthy is he going to be? It's a fractured tibia. He's going to be able to be a factor in this series. When he comes back, how good is he going to be? Because he definitely spreads out for 50 balance, I should say, to the Trailblazers. And there's a lot of different things for him. What a great pickup that was, by the way, getting Nurkic to kind of help turn this Trailblazers season around. They were 17-5 down the stretch. They're a much better basketball team when he's there and healthy. I mean, I still think the Warriors beat the Trailblazers with him. But there's a couple of key matchups. And, on the other end, who's Portland going to put up against Durant? And I guess we'd start out Harkless. You might see Alfred Camino in there. He's a better defensive player. But point I made yesterday is whoever it is guarding Durant, if Durant is on, it's almost impossible to stop him.
Yeah, it is. Kevin Durant making a serious case to be one of the more unstoppable players, being a small forward that he is. I don't know how small that is. The guy's, was 6'5". How small that is, but he's
7 feet. I've said that for at least 7 feet.
He's at least 7 feet. Well, see, there you go. So there's nothing small about Kevin Durant. They're making a really good case right now for working their magic. I believe it's going to be on display. You were talking about defensively, who's going to take over the Durant duties, as I like to call it. Maurice Harkless is a decent defender. I don't know that you want to put him there. I mean, you need a bigger, more taller body than Maurice Harkless is. But when you look at Kevin Durant, it's almost impossible keeping that touch off the glass, his ability to finish off, to stay within plays. He's in the paint. He's under the basket. It's really hard to find out who's going to guard him. It's going to come down to game time decision. You're going to see Portland doing some switching. They're going to try to find out who their best defensive talent is to offset Kevin Durant's innate ability to get on the perimeter, hit the threes, hit the jumpers. And look, the Warriors, something we haven't really spoken about is the passing of this team. Because in 2015, 2016, they were an on-point passing team. There was almost no errors at all. You've seen it every now and again. Of course, every NBA team does. But when you look at the passing of the ball from one player to another, it's crisp, it's sharp, it's accurate, even if you have to make almost like a double clutch move to get the ball to Durant on the outside edge of the three-point line to hit that dagger three, as he's been known to do over his career. Do you foresee the Trailblazers at all being able to use some type of transition magic, or who do you see the pairings against from the Trailblazers to stop Durant from making those threes at will?
Well, yeah, you mentioned a couple of players there, and the problem for Portland and every other team is, okay, you get a smaller guy, clip a guy on him. Well, you've got the height advantage, you can shoot over him, you can post up against that guy. Okay, you're going to put out a bigger, more physical guy on him, he'll be able to drive around that guy. That's the problem that's confronting Portland in this series. I mean, I don't know, Ed Davis coming off the bench, I don't know why. Ed Davis is a guy I've always identified. I'd like to see him coming off the bench for the Warriors to be a good guy for them. But other than that, I just don't think they have anybody who can stop Durant on a consistent basis. Probably Alfred Camino would be the best on a short period of time, but, it's just a matter of time with Durant. If he's on, if he's in rhythm, that's that. And he's going to get open looks against Portland. Portland is a little better defensively when Alfred Camino is on the floor. The numbers bear that out, but they're not good enough against the Warriors.
I don't either. Trailblazers are limping into this, and I say limping only because they're able to get those wins in the Western Conference they needed to get. But at times, Trailblazers, they were literally trailing in a variety of games that they should have won. Unfortunately for them, they end up in the 8th seed. They didn't play very good transition defense. I don't look for them to be able to match up from a speed standpoint of the Golden State Warriors in order to really make this a game. We were talking about Draymond Green earlier. 2012, this is an interesting factoid, 2012, 2013, averaging 3.3 rebounds per game. Last year, he averaged 7.9. He's played 76 games, overall looking very close to the Draymond of 2015, raising that field goal percentage. What do you believe are the keys to him being able to get back to the form that he was then?
I think you were cutting out there, but I think you were asking about Draymond. And, this is the thing with Durant being back. He doesn't have to worry about the offensive end of the floor, and he said that's not going to be my concern this year. Again, the one thing about Draymond is he doesn't need to score. It's the same thing with Iguodala, and you have these other guys. Time to time, he'll be open for a three when the shot clock is running out. Steve Kerr is okay with that. Just don't take those early threes. You've got pretty good shooters on the floor most of the time. Everything with him is about the defensive end, doing the little things, the hustle plays, the 50-50 balls. And, you mentioned the rebounding, and he's a very good passer. And he's a guy who can kind of be that point power forward who will take it into the paint and maybe draw the defense and then kick out for open wing threes, things like that. He's a very good passer on top of everything else. So that's part of the game that I do appreciate about Draymond. But the intangible is the fire that he brings to the team. And people have this image of the Warriors being sort of, soft. And you hear that all the time, Charles Barkley, that's a jump shooting team. But Draymond brings it from that junkyard dog attitude. And I think that's the great counterbalance that's on the floor when Draymond is there. And you need that in the postseason. Now, went overboard last year in the finals, you know that, but by and large, he's a benefit.
No, he's definitely a benefit. He's only been ejected once this year. I mean, I don't like to talk about ejections because there's such a detractor. When you think of the personality that it takes for you to be out on the court, your elbow to elbow, your elbow to side, and keeping yourself under control, keeping yourself cool, calm, and collected. And I think Draymond Green has learned that, especially this year, considering all the outbursts last year, keeping it more of a level head. And I think Durant also helps in that regard as well when you think of what he brings and how silent we were talking about silent leaders in the opening part of the show. Being a silent leader, I think Kevin Durant has some effect on Draymond Green's attitude in relation to how he approaches the game. Maybe being able to take over a little bit of that something that he brings every single time he's on the hardwood court.
Well, I think it's a fair thing to say. You bring in a fiery player who's a star, that can be contestable with Draymond involved there. But I think that now that they've had a full year together, like I said, they've got a pretty good understanding. But yeah, relatively speaking, Draymond was strange compared to last year. Now, again, when the stakes are higher, when the emotions are amped up as they will be in the playoffs, that's going to be a test for him. We were joking all year about he might get to that 16-test threshold and just take the day off in the last game. Just so, he can get himself ready for the playoffs. It turns out Steve Kerr rested him anyway last night, but he didn't quite make that threshold. So I guess that's a step forward. But that's going to be how the emotions are controlled when you're, for example, getting to the Western Conference Finals or, once again, facing the Cavaliers possibly in the finals. Because, we know about everything that happened last year, and that'll be brought up repeatedly.
Yeah, no, I guarantee the refereeing system is going to be a little bit different. You're going to find a little bit of a different type of attitude and mentality knowing what happened last year. I guarantee the refs are more than briefed in relation to who Draymond Green is, what he brings to the game, but being able to say, look, man, you got to keep this stuff under wraps. We're talking about Durant. On the other hand, he's playing even better as he did with his field goal percentage, which was raised significantly, 32% this year, which is amazing considering he had such a good year with the Thunder. Last year, Durant is helping in the blocking department as well with the blocks and the aforementioned, with 25 points on an average as well. So Kevin Durant doing it well, Draymond Green doing it well, Steph Curry doing it well. Is this team unbeatable moving forward with what you have seen throughout the season? Do they take the Trailblazers out in 4 or less?
Well, I'm going to give the Trailblazers the benefit of the doubt and maybe they get on fire, and Damian Lillard can't. He's done that against the Warriors before. So it took him one in Portland. But I think the Warriors take this as 5. Wouldn't shock me if they sweep it. And looking forward, whether you're talking about the Spurs or the Rockets or the Cavaliers or anyone, if the Warriors are playing their game and if they're healthy, nobody beats them. To me, they're odds-on favorites. If Durant is close to 100%, they are odds-on favorites to get the title.
Yeah, I do as well. First game opens up April 16th at Oracle Arena. I know the fans will be screaming to the top of their lungs saying, well, we're familiar with this. Do you see more of a ruckus demeanor considering how they went out last year by the fans, or is this going to be an even keel playing with a chip on her shoulder? We're going to watch our team do the same thing.
Yeah, it's funny. I got a chuckle out of Klay Thompson saying, we're counting on the fans to be there and be loud. A couple of years ago, you wouldn't have had to say that. But it's a different crowd now there because, the Warriors are a hot ticket. It's more expensive. The lower bowl at Oracle is a little more high tone, let's put it that way, than it used to be. But it's still pretty loud. And, we were just talking last night, we were doing a little bit about the 10th anniversary of We Believe. And Steve Kerr mentioned it, I think, that's the loudest he's ever heard an arena. When the Warriors played the Mavericks in that series 10 years ago, the Warriors upset Dallas, which was a 67-win team at the time. And I was in the arena for a couple of those games, and I literally thought the roof was going to come off. It was so loud. It is the loudest outside of a rock concert that I've heard in an arena event. So it hasn't reached that level in the last couple of years, and part of that is, the nature of the crowd and also the expectations with the team. Everybody's fully expecting them to run Portland out in the first round, except for Damian Lillard, I guess. But, beyond that, the full expectation is this is all a prelude of getting to the finals in the match against Cleveland. When you get to that point, it's just organically, it's going to be intense in the arena. We know that. So I would say it's kind of, it's gone from 11 to 10 as far as the crowd intensity over the last couple of years. So it's still a pretty great atmosphere.
Yeah, no, I have yet to go to an NBA game. I'm looking forward to my first one whenever I can get there.
Oh, we got to get you there.
Yeah, tell me about it. I wouldn't mind going. I used to live in the Bay Area, so I'm familiar with where Oracle Arena is, of course, right inside of where the former Oakland Raiders have, are playing. And I say former to the extent of they still have 2 more years in the contract. So I'm not putting the cart before the horse. But when you look at where that is, it's an easy on, easy off, easy access arena. Probably one of the easiest accesses I have ever seen in any professional sport. Whereas you go to Qualcomm, where the former Chargers have played, and it's tough. It's tough getting there because you have to take a trolley and all that. So, at the end of the day, I think Golden State does it well. I think it's going to be a very competitive matchup, at least in the onset. But I think there's too much Warriors, too much fandom, too many fans, just a lot going on. I don't think that you're going to find Lillard and Harkless and all these other guys being able to really, because they really haven't been there. If you think about it, neither one of these guys have been to this point. So for them to be in it, there's a level of intensity that's going to exist mentally speaking. Whether or not Portland can really pull it off, that remains to be seen. But I also pick Golden State Warriors to really put a shellacking to Portland. I don't have a dog in the fight. Of course, I'm in Southern California. Of course, the Lakers are here, but that really doesn't account for much considering what they're going through right now in transitions and, coaching changes and personnel and throwing people under the bus, no pun intended on the word bus. It's just a lot of stuff going on here in LA. But last but not least, when you look at Portland, what stands out to you the most? Is it Lillard, hitting basically 27, 28 points per game? Is it McCollum? Is it Nurkic? Who can really get it rolling on the 16th at Oracle Arena against this wonderful Warriors team that's been playing really, really well?
Well, Damian Lillard's going to be fired up. It's his hometown. Oakland's his hometown. A lot of people know him and love him here in the Bay Area. But it's that backcourt. That's their strength. McCollum and Lillard get it done in different ways. McCollum can get into the paint, can hit the mid-range jumper. Lillard a little more explosive from deep. If they get it going, they can take a game. And by the way, the series last year, which went 5 games, was as competitive a 5-game series as I've seen. The Trailblazers gave the Warriors a run for their money at that time, and we know that Steph was out for a portion of that series. I don't think it's going to be quite as easy this time. They had some complementary pieces that were hitting their threes last time in that last series, including Alfredo Camino. I think he was 16 for 29 from three-point range, kind of a surprise there. So I don't know if he repeats that. But that's what really stands out with Portland is that backcourt. That's what they're going to live and die with. And the other factor is Nurkic. And, I mentioned how important he was to the turnaround getting into the playoffs after a slow start this year, acquiring Nurkic. But how healthy is he going to be? How effective? And that's where spreading out this series does help Portland a little bit. We're talking Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday. That's nuts for scheduling playoff series. But I guess the NBA figures that series will be over rather quickly, and they'll try to stretch out as much as they could. But that does benefit Portland if they want to get Nurkic back. It may be too late when he comes back, and he may not be as effective as he normally would be as he comes back from a fractured fibula. But they'd much rather have him than not, and he's going to be something to deal with in future years. But in this series, this year, like I said, Portland might take the game, and it'll probably be because Lillard, McCollum go off. And that's certainly something they're capable of doing for one game at least. But defensively, this Warriors squad is too strong, and offensively, they match Portland with firepower.
No, they definitely do. I think they have a little bit more of an X factor, and that X factor is Durant. I mean, Durant can hit from anywhere. He's done it in his career. He's even better now, and I think he's on a roll after that basic beating of the LA Lakers. And unfortunately, Lakers are more accustomed to feeling that beating than they aren't being able to win some games. But with Durant there, I don't know. I just don't know they have enough. I really don't.
No, they don't.
At the end of the day. Hey, Ray, I'd like to flip the script here for a minute to kind of stay in the Bay Area. I've been known to go to some 49er games only because I lived in the Bay Area and I got in with a season ticket holder. Of course, the Steelers didn't come to the 49ers while I was there in the Bay Area. Unfortunately, it wasn't the time of the year. And I'm a Steeler fan by default. But when you look at the 49ers, John Lynch taking over, I'm sure there was a lot of question marks in regards to fans. I know I've seen this blowing up across my Twitter feed in relation to he's never ran a team. He's only been a part of a team, and that was the Denver Broncos in the AFC. When you look at this John Lynch acquisition, releasing a bunch of guys, is he the right guy for the job? I mean, do you foresee him making the moves that matter? We have an upcoming draft here on the 21st in Philadelphia. Do they pull the trigger at a quarterback in the second pick?
I know that Kyle Shanahan would like Kirk Cousins. I don't know if that happens this year. From what I see so far, that number 2 pick, that they'd like to trade it back. In fact, I think John Lynch said it earlier this week. We're open for business. If they don't get Myles Garrett, they'd like to trade it back. These reports about the Browns possibly passing on Myles Garrett, I take that with a grain of salt. Don't tease me with that. I mean, even the Browns couldn't mess this up, right? They got to take Myles Garrett. But if they don't, that's the pick I'd make. And if Myles Garrett isn't there, I would trade back. I don't think any other pick or any other player screams as being a number 2 pick. But to your question about Lynch, I mean, the early returns are encouraging. I mean, he's got a lot of holes to fill here. They still have a lot of cap space. They haven't signed everybody they need to sign just yet. But I think the players they brought in are at least a step up. Quality. I mean, this is a guy who certainly understands football, and he did spend some time with John Elway at the Broncos a few years ago, kind of learning the ropes, kind of shadowing, understanding, some of the things you have to do in the front office. I will admit, I was one of those people when the news came out that he was going to be hired. It's like, what? John Lynch? That was under the radar for sure. And Lynch made sure it was under the radar because he wanted to see whether they could hold to his demand that they not leak, because that was a big problem when Trent Baalke was here, and not just Baalke, but maybe Jed York as well. Well, no maybe about it, probably Jed York. There's some leaking going on the last few years, and Lynch was smart enough to see that was a problem that, overshadowed the last part of Jim Harbaugh's tenure here. You want to make sure that that stuff ended, and pretty much it has. So I think that he gets it as far as the culture part of it, what needed to be changed. We'll see just how much football acumen he has. So far, so good is all I can say. Nobody's expecting a whole lot out of this year. This is a big rebuilding project. He's brought in a placeholder quarterback in Hoyer. That's going to be the key decision going forward. They've got a pretty good head coach who understands quarterback play. That had to happen here. And so, if not this year, the way this team is going to move forward as a franchise and get back into the playoffs is at the quarterback position. It sounds like that's not going to happen until 2018. So fans, I think, understand that you have to tear this down before you build it back up again, and now the building begins.
Yeah, it's going to take a little bit of time, and I'm being gracious only because you go through the likes of Colin Kaepernick. You don't know if it's going to be Gabbard or Kaepernick or Gabernick. That's interesting. You don't know who your quarterback's going to be. But if you had those guys melted together, it would be a Gabernick. Unfortunately, Colin Kaepernick left a lot on the table because he didn't want to be backup anymore. Clearly, he's still one of those free agents that are floating around, and I think not to get too much into this because it's already a dragged out, knockdown conversation. Colin Kaepernick kneeling with the national anthem, one of the reasons why he's not being signed by an NFL team, even though they need a quarterback. It's kind of mind-blowing. I mean, he did good. His numbers are good, but it goes to show that when your numbers are good on the field, that doesn't necessarily translate to another team when they look at the character issues. There are a lot of NFL players that do have those. Michael Irvin just picked up he had marijuana in his possession. Senquez Golson just got picked up by the TSA because he was carrying a gun. Murphy also carrying a gun at TSA. Look, when you have character issues by a player, the team may get a loss in advance. Obviously, it doesn't count against their regular season loss, but when you look at the loss from a character standpoint, did the 49ers say okay for the right reasons to let Kaepernick check free agency?
Well, I think that for Kaepernick and the 49ers, probably was time to move on anyway. It's probably not like Kyle Shanahan is looking for a quarterback going forward. But, I want to be precise on this whole character thing. Colin Kaepernick wasn't arrested. He didn't get in trouble with the law or anything. He stirred up a lot of emotions with what he did. But I'll say this until I'm done doing sports talk. If he was a all-pro level player, that wouldn't be an issue. The team has a quarterback need, and the guy falls on the right side of the talent tolerance scale, whatever else is going on, they're going to sign him. But he's not quite good enough to overcome that. And yes, the numbers were pretty good, and he had no weapons last year, really. But if you watched him play game to game, some of the same problems were there in terms of accuracy in key situations, especially on third down. It's kind of surprised me at the end of the year he only had 4 picks with 16 touchdowns. So, he wasn't terrible in a terrible situation, but he wasn't. He's not the superstar that he was a few years ago. If he's an MVP candidate, he gets signed by somebody. We know that's how it works in the NFL. But if you're not that good, if there are other concerns about you from other GMs, it's going to take longer. And in this case, it's also about a guy who sees himself as a starting quarterback, and there are other teams that may not see him that way. And then it comes down to, well, what's the salary match? And there's not a salary match there yet either. But there's, without a doubt, lesser quarterbacks have been signed. It's easier to sign those guys. They're cheaper, and you can slot them and pigeonhole them. You can't do that with Kaepernick right now because there's disagreement over just how good he could be with a certain team. So it's a combination of the politics and a bad match for some teams right now. But I'd imagine eventually somebody's going to pick him up.
Yeah, but for backup purposes, he may want too much money. He wants starter money. That starter money is not going to come. Another guy out there in the market as well. Look, when we talk about quarterbacks, there isn't a plethora of free agent quarterbacks out there. You got guys like Cutler still on the wire, who's not very good either, overpaid by the Chicago Bears for years, and Kaepernick's going to find himself in the same situation. I think Cutler more likely to be signed by a team as a backup in a backup role because he's done it. He got paid more to be on the sideline than he did to be on the field. I think Kaepernick may feel the same type of crunch, but if he's asking too much money, then there's clearly no ground by any team to say, you know what, we'll go ahead and sign him because he's not going to agree to back up money. Adrian Peterson reminds me of that as well. He goes in, he visits, he was with the Patriots, leaves with no contract. Why? Because he's asking too much money. I think injuries have a lot to do with the reason why he's not going to get the money. He's on the wrong side of 30 is another reason why he's not going to get that kind of money that he's really looking for. And same with Colin Kaepernick and a list of other guys that still have yet to be signed. Ray, you have been the man. Thank you for hanging out with me for practically an entire hour.
Is that how long it's been? I thought it was 5 minutes.
It feels like 5 minutes when you're having fun. It's just one of those things that happen. So thank you so much for your time. Let everybody know where they can hear you, what your show's going to be about upcoming, and listen.
Yeah, we're on Sports Zone 680 on KMDR 680, which I believe you can get through iHeart as well, and you can stream it at KMDR.com. We also, on nights that we're on, not on 7 to 10, we got Giants Baseball now. We do Giants Baseball post-game shows. And we go until midnight on weeknights back. And we also do a Warriors pregame show. We don't have the Warrior broadcast, but we still do a pregame, like 30, 45-minute look at the team. And then we take phone calls after the game is over on nights where the Giants aren't playing. And of course, football season, we're out there on Sundays at Levi Stadium doing the pregame show. So there's always something going on. And if you're not within the radius of the 50,000-watt flow source, you can definitely get us online.
Online seems to be where it's all going anyway. It's the new media. Ray Woodson, ladies and gentlemen, shoot him a follow at Ray Woodson 680. He's on Twitter. Ray, it's been a pleasure. Thank you again for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. I enjoyed it. Thanks, Rudy.
Hey, no problem. Thanks. Appreciate it, Ray. We'll talk soon. Hey, maybe get up to a Niner or Steeler game sometime.
Are they on the schedule this year?
No. Well, hold on a second. In all fairness, there is a preseason schedule, but not a full-blown schedule. But from my sense, my spider senses are tingling, probably not.
Yeah, I don't think that's the division they play in the AFC this year. But
yeah, exactly.
My brother-in-law is a big Steelers fan, so maybe we'll make a junket out to Pittsburgh.
Hey, sounds good. I could be there for training camp. You never know.
There you go.
Thanks, Ray. Appreciate your time. We'll talk soon.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Ray Woodson. Don't confuse him with Ron Woodson. Great guy. Love talking to him. Good talk. Talked about everything from the Warriors, Portland, the Niners. Where are they at? I mean, where are they really at? Are they around somewhere? I don't know. Well, we're going to find out because they're certainly making their presence known in basically the news, sporting news, GM Don Lynch. Wow, I'm still kind of shocked at that. Anyway, I'm out of time. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I'll see you next week. This is Rudy Reyes on the Rude Dog Show at WBLZSports.com. I do have, basically a last-minute ditch effort at paying the bills here. So, anyway, I'll be back. I'll leave you with the commercial. This is Rudy Reyes on the Rude Dog Show at WBLZSports.com.
This is the sheet. Gets me all revved up. My face is now red. My ears are just freaking boiling.
He's so raw. He's so raw. This guy hates it. Yeah, he had 51 touchdowns. 4,900 total yards.
I know y'all like that, but I got to run. And only in Alabama that could happen, I have to say.
They're so good, man. They would win the Big Ten if they were in the Big Ten. You could be doing something vision-based in front of you and reach down and grab a handful of insane goodness.
Good to him. Kudos. I'm flapping like a golfer. Very good, Johnny. Proud of you.
Wow. You guys agree on something again? I'm very impressed. Do you ever have a bad week? You know, just you walk outside, step in a bow, like right when you walk outside, like, how did a bow right outside the house? Or you stand on the curb and somebody drives by and slashes water.